The suffocating heat of a mid-July afternoon wrapped around the city, thick with the smell of melting asphalt and stale fryer grease. A man in a stained work shirt clutching a plastic dinosaur just wanted to get his 5-year-old daughter home from a roadside diner. But parked on the curb, a woman in a wedding dress worth more than his annual salary was falling apart in a way that demanded attention, whether he had the energy for it or not. The air shimmered over the cracked parking lot. Arthur could feel a familiar ache settling into his lower back, a constant companion from too many years on his feet, and his daughter Maya was latched onto his arm, her fingers sticky from a grape popsicle that was melting faster than she could eat it. He was tired. Not the kind of tired a good night's sleep could fix, but the bone-deep fatigue of 3 years as a single parent, wrestling with late rent notices and a kitchen faucet that dripped with a mocking, steady rhythm. His life had become a series of small, grinding battles, and he had lost the energy for anyone else's drama. He just wanted to get to his car, a dented sedan that looked as worn out as he felt, and drive the 20 minutes to their cramped apartment. That's when he saw her. The bride was wedged in the grimy alley between the diner's dumpster and the towering hedges of the high-end country club next door. It was a jarring collision of worlds. Her dress was a magnificent construction of ivory silk and delicate beading, a gown designed for a cathedral, now crumpled against a rusting dumpster. Arthur paused. His first thought was brutally selfish, a desperate plea to the universe. Just let me get past this. Let me get home. But he stopped, watching her. She wasn't crying in a delicate movie star way. This was a visceral, violent unraveling. Her shoulders heaved with ragged, uncontrollable sobs. She was tearing silver pins from her elaborate updo, throwing them to the greasy asphalt with enough force to make her scalp bleed. She was a trapped animal, fighting against the suffocating weight of her own life, tearing at the bars of a cage she hadn't known she was in. "Daddy, look, that lady is having a really bad day." Maya's voice was bright and piercing, cutting through the stifling air with the blunt honesty of a child. Arthur winced, pulling her closer and whispering, "Shh, Bug. Don't stare." But it was too late. The bride's head snapped up. Arthur flinched, expecting a fragile, sobbing mess. Instead, he was met with a gaze of pure, undiluted fury. Her mascara was smeared into dark streaks, her lipstick was a blurry red wound across her mouth, and her jaw was clenched so tight he could see the muscles twitching in her neck. She didn't look heartbroken. She looked like a CEO who had just discovered a catastrophic embezzlement scheme. "What are you looking at?" she snarled, her voice a raw, raspy scrape. Arthur sighed. He didn't have the strength for a confrontation. "I'm just trying to get to my car," he said, his voice flat and tired. "It's behind you." The woman glanced at his battered car, then back at him, making no move to get out of his way. She just stared, her chest still heaving, her hands clutching the heavy fabric of her dress. As Arthur tried to edge past, the smell hit him, a sharp mix of expensive jasmine perfume, cold sweat, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. He saw the violent trembling in her shoulders and the angry red crescents her manicured nails were digging into her forearms. The cynical, exhausted part of his brain screamed at him to get in the car and drive away. He had his own life to manage, his own battles to fight. But he stopped. "You're having a panic attack," he said, his voice devoid of pity. "I am not," she fired back, the denial immediate and fierce. "I'm having a logistical crisis." Arthur snorted, a humorless sound. "Right. Well, your logistical crisis is hyperventilating next to a dumpster that smells like rotten cabbage and old milk." She glared at him, her mouth opening to deliver what was sure to be a blistering retort. Instead, a terrible ragged gasp tore from her throat. Her eyes went wide with sudden terror as her lungs refused to work. The corporate armor shattered in an instant. She doubled over, her forehead pressed against her knees, gasping like a fish out of water. "Oh, for crying out loud," Arthur muttered. He looked at his daughter. "Bug, stay by the bumper. Don't touch anything." Maya nodded, already licking a purple drop from her wrist. Arthur crouched down, his knees complaining loudly. He kept a wary distance, the heat from the pavement radiating through his worn-out sneakers. "Hey," he said, his voice low and steady, not gentle but solid as a rock. "Look at the ground. Find a crack in the asphalt and stare at it." The woman shook her head, a frantic, jerky motion. "Look at the crack," Arthur repeated, his voice firm. "Now." Reluctantly, her head lifted. Her eyes, red-rimmed and wild, finally focused on a jagged fissure in the concrete near his boot. "Breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, Arthur instructed. "I'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it." She choked, a coughing sob escaping her throat. "Try again," he said, his face an unreadable mask. "No one's watching. It's just me and a kid eating purple sugar next to a dumpster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it." For 5 agonizing minutes Arthur crouched there, his knees aching, the mingled scents of rancid garbage and expensive perfume filling his nostrils. He watched her wage a war inside her own head, a battle he knew all too well. Slowly the frantic heaving of her chest began to ease. The terrified glaze in her eyes faded, replaced by a profound, hollow exhaustion. She slumped back against the diner's brick wall, not even flinching as a loose piece of mortar scraped the delicate lace of her veil, tearing it with a sharp sound. "Better?" Arthur asked, staying in his crouch. She swallowed, her throat clicking, and managed a stiff, formal, "Yes. Thank you." The walls were already going back up. She was scrambling for her dignity, trying to reassemble the broken pieces of her composure in the middle of a dirty alley. Arthur reached into his cargo pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of cheap baby wipes. He tugged one out, the scent of artificial strawberries and cheap soap filling the air, and held it out to her. She stared at it like it was a live snake. "Your face," Arthur explained. "You look like you wrestled a Halloween mask and lost." For a second he thought she was going to slap him. Her eyes flashed with indignation. But then, a strange thing happened. The corner of her mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, not quite, but a grimace of bitter, weary defeat. She snatched the wipe from his hand. "My stylist charged me a fortune for waterproof makeup," she murmured, scrubbing at her eyes with a brutal efficiency that was almost impressive. "You should ask for a refund," Arthur said, standing up with a groan. "Or sue her for emotional damages." "I'll be doing both," the woman replied, her tone deadly serious. It wasn't a joke. Over the next few minutes, he learned her name was Nora. She didn't offer a last name, and Arthur, who was already thinking about how to get a tired and bored 5-year-old home, didn't bother asking. He had started the car's engine to get the air conditioning running, and Maya was settled in her car seat. But he didn't drive away. He told himself it was because the car needed to cool down, but in truth he couldn't just abandon her there. "He sent an email," Nora said suddenly, her voice a flat, emotionless statement that cut through the heavy air. Arthur leaned against his car's warm hood, arms crossed, watching her. "A scheduled email," she corrected, her voice laced with a venom so cold it was almost clinical. "Sent to my personal inbox 15 minutes before the ceremony." "A scheduled email," Arthur repeated, raising an eyebrow. "He planned it." "He's a coward," Arthur said, the simple, brutal truth of it hanging in the air between them. Nora looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "You don't sound surprised." "I'm 34. I work in a distribution center, and I raise a kid alone," Arthur said. "I haven't been surprised by human nature in a long time. Facing a furious woman in a wedding dress is hard. Pressing send on a laptop is easy." Nora flinched. "It's humiliating," she whispered, and for the first time the anger receded, leaving behind a stark, hollow shame. "There are hundreds of people in that ballroom right now. My board members, my rivals, the press. They are all eating seared scallops and whispering about me right now." "So let them whisper," Arthur said. Nora snapped her head up, the CEO returning in a flash. "You don't understand. I can't be a subject of pity. Pity is weakness. If they see me as a jilted bride, they see me as unstable, unpredictable." Arthur looked at her, really looked at her. Under the ruined makeup and the shredded veil, he saw a woman who was fighting a war he couldn't even imagine, a desperate need to control a situation that had spun completely out of control. He didn't know her world of boardrooms and press releases, but he knew what it meant to hold on to control when everything was burning down. "All right," Arthur said, taking a step back, giving her space. "So what's your move?" Nora blinked, thrown by the question. "My move?" "Yeah, you can't stay here forever. The dinner rush is coming and they'll be taking out the trash soon. You need an exit strategy." Nora closed her eyes, and for a moment she just breathed. Arthur could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the relentless, calculating machinery of a woman who had fought her way to the top. When she opened her eyes, they were cold, hard, and focused. The panic was gone, locked away. "My phone is in the bridal suite," she said, her tone clipped and efficient. "I need to make a call. I don't have a phone on me." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a cracked old smartphone, holding it out to her. "The screen sticks a little. You have to press hard." Nora took the phone without a word, her fingers tapping in a 10-digit number from memory. "Elena," she said, her voice transforming instantly into the cold, commanding tone of a CEO. "It's Nora. Do not panic. Listen to me very carefully. You're going to go to the microphone and inform the guests that a family emergency has required my immediate departure. You will not mention his name. If anyone asks, you tell them you don't know. Then, you call the PR team and prep a holding statement about a minor health scare. Dehydration, overwork. Spin it into a testament to my dedication to the company." Arthur watched, morbidly fascinated. It was like watching a general orchestrating a flawless retreat under heavy fire. There was no emotion, only tactical precision. "Next," Nora continued, her voice dropping lower, a terrifying intensity building, "I want his access badge to the corporate tower deactivated. Call the legal team and freeze the escrow account for the joint property. I don't want him getting a dime. I want him completely and entirely excised from my life by sundown. Am I clear? Good. Send a black SUV to the diner next to the club, the back alley. 5 minutes." She hung up and handed the cracked phone back to Arthur. "Efficient," Arthur noted, slipping it back into his pocket. "Survival usually is," Nora replied. She bent down and unbuckled the delicate straps of her designer heels, stepping out of them and leaving them sitting perfectly parallel on the grimy asphalt. Then she reached up and tore the veil from her hair, letting the expensive tool drop to the ground like a fallen flag of surrender. "Those are expensive shoes to leave next to a garbage can," Arthur pointed out. "They're contaminated," Nora said simply. They stood in silence for 3 minutes. The hum of Arthur's air conditioning competed with the distant roar of traffic. The tension had shifted. It was no longer frantic, just heavy, a strange temporary purgatory between a catastrophe and its aftermath. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows rolled into the parking lot and pulled up smoothly beside Arthur's car. The back door swung open. Nora didn't move immediately. She looked at the car, then back at Arthur. "I don't know your name," she said. "Arthur. The sticky kid in the back is Maya." "Arthur," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "Thank you for the wipes and the counting." "Don't mention it," Arthur said with a tight, lopsided smile. "I'm sure it ruins your corporate image." Nora looked at him for a long moment, taking in the grease stains on his jeans, the deep shadows under his eyes, the absolute lack of deference in his posture. He hadn't treated her like a CEO. He hadn't treated her like a broken victim. He had treated her like a person having a truly terrible Tuesday. "Goodbye, Arthur," she said, and turned to climb into the SUV. The door shut with a heavy thud, and the vehicle glided away, disappearing onto the main road. Arthur stood there for a second. He looked at the abandoned veil and the designer heels on the asphalt. He shook his head, got in his car, and cranked the AC. "Was that a princess, Daddy?" Maya asked from the back seat, her face smeared with purple. "No, Bug," Arthur said, pulling away from the curb. "Just a lady who had a very bad day at work." The bizarre encounter faded into the background noise of his relentless life. He went home, made boxed macaroni and cheese, read a bedtime story about a hedgehog, and fell asleep on his sagging mattress, worrying about the transmission in his car. He didn't think about Nora again until 4 months later, when a courier knocked on his door. November had arrived with a cold, wet, biting edge. Arthur's apartment smelled perpetually of cheap pasta and the metallic scent of a struggling space heater. The transmission on his sedan had finally given out a week prior, and he was now adding 2 hours of miserably cold bus rides to his shift at the distribution center. It was a Tuesday evening, and Maya was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, clutching a plastic triceratops. Arthur was at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of overdue bills under the harsh, flickering light of a failing bulb, mentally calculating which utility he could skip for another month. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, rhythmic raps that rattled the cheap wood. Arthur frowned and walked to the door, turning the deadbolt. A man stood in the dim hallway, looking profoundly out of place. He wore a tailored charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than Arthur's annual rent. The rain had darkened the shoulders of the wool, and the air around him smelled of expensive cedar wood. "Arthur Pendleton?" the man asked, his voice smooth. "Yeah," Arthur said, instantly on guard, blocking the view into the apartment. "Who's asking?" The man didn't answer, instead reaching inside his coat and producing a small, matte black box and a thick, cream-colored envelope, holding them out. "Delivery," he said. Arthur didn't take them. "I'm not signing for anything I can't afford." "No signature required," the man replied. He stepped forward, placed the items on the wobbly shelf inside the door, gave a curt nod, and turned to walk away, his heels clicking on the concrete floor. Arthur closed the door and slowly carried the items to the kitchen table, pushing aside the electric bill to make room. He opened the envelope first. The paper was so thick it felt like cardboard. Inside was a single sheet with a short typed message. "Arthur, I despise outstanding ledgers. Unpaid debts create imbalances, and I do not tolerate imbalance. The enclosed object is cast from the melted remnants of a very expensive mistake. I had the stones crushed. It seemed fitting. I kept the platinum. Consider it hazard pay for enduring the smell of rotting cabbage and a stranger's logistical failure. If you are as pragmatic as I suspect, you will sell it. Use the capital to fix your vehicle. Taking a child on the city bus in November is inefficient. However, if you are looking for a different kind of efficiency, I have a hemorrhaging distribution hub in the South District. The current manager is a coward who hides behind spreadsheets. I need someone who knows how to look at the concrete when things fall apart. Address below. Nora. Beneath the signature was an address for a corporate tower downtown and a time. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. Arthur stared at the letter. She had someone look into me. The thought was invasive and clinical. He set the letter down and reached for the matte black box. He popped the lid. Resting on a bed of dark velvet was a ring. It wasn't delicate or ornate. It was a thick, heavy slab of brushed platinum, industrial and brutalist. It caught the harsh kitchen light and seemed to absorb it. Arthur picked it up. The metal was freezing against his skin, and it weighed a ton. It was a physical manifestation of Nora's ruthless, uncompromising reality. He let out a short, harsh breath that was almost a laugh. He looked over at Maya, who stirred in her sleep. He looked at the electric bill. Then he looked back at the ring. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, turning the heavy platinum over and over in his calloused fingers, listening to the rain lash against the window. The lobby of the Vanguard Logistics building was intimidating by design, a cavernous space of white marble, brushed steel, and floor-to-ceiling glass. It smelled of ozone and white tea. Arthur walked through the revolving doors at 8:45 on Thursday morning, feeling the physical weight of his own poverty. His boots were scuffed. His jacket was a heavy canvas work coat that smelled faintly of diesel. A security guard in a sharp suit looked him up and down. "Deliveries go around back," the man said, dismissing him instantly. Arthur didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the cream-colored envelope and placed it on the glass desk. "I'm not a delivery. I'm expected on the top floor. By Nora." The guard looked at the envelope, then at Arthur. He picked up a phone. "Yeah, Chloe. Got a guy down here, says he's expected by the CEO. No appointment." "Understood." He pushed a temporary badge across the glass. "Elevator bank C, straight to the top. Do not stop." The elevator ride was silent and fast. When the doors opened, Arthur stepped into a world of hushed chaos. People in expensive suits moved briskly across sound-dampening carpets. A young woman intercepted him immediately. "Mr. Pendleton, follow me." She led him past rows of glass-walled offices to a pair of massive dark oak doors, pushed them open, and stepped aside. Arthur walked in. The office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray sprawl of the city. Behind a black marble desk sat Nora. She looked nothing like the woman by the dumpster. The ruined dress was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp charcoal blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a severe knot. The smudged mascara was a ghost. Her face was a mask of perfect composure. She was terrifying. "You didn't sell the ring," she said, not looking up from her monitor. Arthur stopped in front of her desk. "The pawn shop offered me $3,000 for it. Said it was pure." Nora finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, locking on to him with the same intensity she had used on that crack in the asphalt. $3,000 would have fixed your transmission and paid your heating bill for the winter. Why didn't you take it?" "Because $3,000 fixes today," Arthur said. "It doesn't fix tomorrow." And the guy looked like he was going to stab me in the parking lot. A tiny microscopic fraction of a smile tugged at the corner of Nora's mouth. It was gone in a millisecond. "Sit." Arthur sat, the leather creaking loudly. Nora leaned back, steepling her fingers. My South District distribution hub is bleeding money. The turnover rate for floor workers is at 40%. Inventory shrinkage is unacceptable. The current manager is terrified of the floor and the workers. He is a liability. And you think I can fix it? Arthur asked. I know you work in a warehouse. I know you have a child, which makes you desperate for stability and therefore reliable. I also know that when presented with a catastrophe, you did not panic. You offered no useless platitudes, and you did not coddle the failure. You forced a reset. She leaned forward. I don't do charity, Arthur. Charity is an insult. I do investments. I'm offering you the management position at the South Hub. The salary is $95,000 a year plus performance bonuses, full health coverage for you and your daughter. Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. $95,000. It was more money than he had ever seen. Why? He asked, his cynical brain searching for the trap. You don't know my qualifications. You could be a terrible manager, Nora agreed easily. And if you are, I'll fire you without a second's hesitation. But I don't think you will be. You understand survival. Corporate logistics isn't a science, Arthur. It's just survival on a larger scale. She pulled a thick contract from a drawer and slid it across the marble. Arthur looked at the contract. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the heavy ring, and set it on the desk. I don't want a trophy, he said, pushing the ring back toward her. I just want a job. Nora looked at the ring, then back at his face. Her expression softened just a fraction. Keep it, she said quietly. It's a reminder. Of what? That the most expensive things in the world can be completely worthless, and that sometimes the things you find next to a dumpster are exactly what you need to survive. Arthur stared at her for a long moment. He picked up the pen. 6 months later, the suffocating heat of July had returned. Arthur stood on the edge of loading dock 4 at the South District Hub. The roar of 18-wheelers was deafening, the air thick with dust and the sharp smell of cardboard. He wore a high-visibility vest, a clipboard tucked under his arm, a smudge of grease on his cheek. He looked tired, but the hollow, desperate exhaustion was gone. He was 20 pounds heavier. His back still hurt, but from walking miles on concrete, not from a broken mattress. Dock 6 is backed up, boss, a forklift driver yelled. Tell them if it's not clear in 10 minutes, they're sweeping the break room for a month, Arthur shouted back, waving him on. He turned around and stopped dead. Standing in the massive doorway, silhouetted against the glaring afternoon sun, was Nora. She wore a tailored navy suit that was wildly out of place in the chaos of grime, noise, and sweat. The floor workers gave her wide berth, casting nervous glances at the CEO, who almost never left the glass tower. She didn't care. She walked straight toward Arthur, stepping over a stray coil of shrink wrap. You're a long way from the marble floors, Arthur said, raising his voice over the rumble of a truck. Nora stopped next to him, looking out over the loading dock. She took a deep breath, not flinching at the smell of exhaust. Shrinkage is down by 12%, she said, not looking at him. Turnover has stabilized. Your floor supervisors are terrified of you, but they respect you. They aren't terrified of me, Arthur scoffed. They're terrified of the forklift drivers. Nora finally turned to look at him. She took in the grease on his face, the sweat on his brow, the solid, grounded stance of a man in his element. Her eyes dropped to his right hand. On his index finger, dulled and scratched from months of work, was the heavy platinum ring. Nora didn't smile, but the hard, guarded edges of her eyes softened. I had a meeting in the financial district, she said, her voice quieter, more conversational. It ended early. I abhor wasted time. Arthur raised an eyebrow. So you decided to come breathe in carbon monoxide? I decided to check if my investment was holding its value. I think you have spreadsheets for that. Spreadsheets lie, Nora said softly. Concrete doesn't. They stood in silence for a minute watching a crew load a truck. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the comfortable, heavy quiet of two people who understood the mechanics of survival. There was no sweeping romance, no cinematic confessions. They were too cynical, too bruised by their pasts for fairy tales. But there was respect. Deep, foundational, unshakable respect. "How is Maya?" Nora asked abruptly. Arthur blinked. She rarely asked about his personal life. "She's good. Lost a front tooth yesterday. Swears the tooth fairy owes her hazard pay for the blood." Nora let out a short, genuine laugh, a rusty sound like a door opening for the first time in years. "Smart girl. Negotiate early." She checked her watch. "I have a board call in 20 minutes. Keep the numbers up, Arthur." "I will," he said. She turned to walk away. "Nora," Arthur called out. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled package, tossing it to her. She caught it with one hand. She looked down. It was a brand-new, unopened pack of strawberry-scented baby wipes. "Just in case you run into any dumpsters on the way back to the tower," Arthur said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. Nora looked at the cheap plastic packaging. Then, for the first time since he had met her, she gave him a full, unguarded smile. It changed her entire face, wiping away the coldness, leaving behind something breathtakingly human. "I'll keep them in the safe," she said. She turned and walked out into the glaring sunlight, slipping into the back of a waiting black SUV. Arthur watched the car pull away. He looked down at the platinum ring on his finger, feeling its heavy, reassuring weight. He took a breath of the diesel-choked air, turned around, and walked back into the beautiful, chaotic mess of his life. It was loud. It was hard. But for the first time in a very long time, it felt completely stable. If this story struck a chord with you today, don't let it end here. We all have those moments where life leaves us on the pavement, but it's the hands that reach out and the ones we choose to hold that define our survival. If you believe in pragmatic, imperfect connections, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the best chapters often start after the breakdown. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more deeply human stories. Stay grounded.